So here it is, Cheryl.
Hey,
we did it.
Yay.
It's a real product we're holding in our hands now.
It's beautiful. Okay. So this is part of the current from Jeanette Powers. The current has microcurrents which go willy-nilly every way. Sometimes when the paddle pushes forward, it's resisting instead of adding. You can sense the bottom based on how the surface yields and swirls. I've never seen so many whirlpools. Porter teaches me how to find the current. This is the part of the river that is deepest and so fastest. It's running near the steeper bank, always. Between the current and the bank, the deepest whirlpools turn, carving out the top of the water. One day my kayak will get sucked into one, but today I steer clear into the deeper, safer waters. I'm learning to read the surface of the water. I'm teaching my paddle to work with the force of the river. The birds dip and swoon, eagles, hawks, finches, more than I know names for. The rest of the caw is quiet. We are far enough away from civilization that there is no evidence of man's footprint on the world, only push of current and push of paddle. There is no hurry here. There are no phones, no traffic, no transactions, no interruptions. My mind is effortless in a way I've never known before. I know I belong here. It's like you can't choose who you fall in love with, and I can't help that this is my unexpected home. There are no invasive thoughts, no keeping up with mental to-do lists. There is no worry of where is he, and what is she, and how are they, and when will I? There is no worry. There is a sandbar. The river is low. Porter and I get out to explore and eat. He has hunks of beef rib. I have bananas and apples. We bank our boats and step onto the temporary island, still against the water's ceaseless drive. We walk out together, sand in toes. The quiet is extraordinary. Porter and I fit as river companions, both appreciating the river for itself. We have no need to impose narratives on the moment. Suddenly behind us is a tremendous burst of noise. Both of us pivot simultaneously and become the centerpiece of a rush of barn swallows in a ballet of flight. They swoop down and around us, circle the sandbar, dozens of wings in furious and gentle, synchronized, chaotic motion. No birds crash or fall. They have that sense of surroundings and fearless movement that is the heart of why I love the river. This is what I'm here to learn. There are shallow rivulets running through the sandbar. The water is cold, cold, and powerful even in the cross-current shallows. Porter says, "Lay at the foot of the rivulet, let the river run over you." This is the heart of the day. As I lay in the shallow delta, the river pushes, the wind caresses, the mind succumbs to peacefulness. I evaporate. My body feels the pull of gravity. I have this feeling I call ocean size. It's when my mind stops the monkey business and I feel fully part of the world, fully connected, as all oceans are really one ocean. As sky seeps the ocean from its surface and drops it as rain, as the water connects every part of the world, necessary, dangerous, impenetrable, penetrating. In this micro-delta, I am beyond ocean size. I am planetary, dissolved and complete. It's poetry.
I know, she's an amazing writer.
It's meditative and, her words flow like the river flows. It's just an incredible use of writing style.
It's very powerful writing. And I've never met Jeanette, but I really want to meet her now. I feel like I've almost committed that essay to memory. I've read it so many times. It's beautiful. This is the beginning of something.
Yes, it is. It's exciting. I'm just really proud of this pieces in here. This compilation is just great. So It's just fun just to read the author bios too.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of them emailed them to you, so I didn't get to read them until, we got the printout, but it's fun to read all their bios.
Yeah, and laying them out, just really seeing the depth of experience. We do have, we have Karen Merriam Goldberg, we have Kevin Rabus, we have people who are well-known writers in the state, but we also have several people, this is their first publication. So that's exciting too, to think, maybe we're launching some people who...
And Harlan Schuster, I don't know if he's been published before, but his photographs have been widely published. But the piece he wrote was just so powerful and so moving. He had brain cancer and surgery, and he wrote about going in for his checkup, and it was just, his use of language is just blew me away,
Yeah.
and he's just such a strong writer.
It really was, yeah, just...
It was fun when the stories started coming in. We started this, when was it, last summer? We started talking about this, and then we go, well, let's say the stories come in November to December, and we had to wait for months and months to get our first story, and then we got like 7 or 8 right off the bat, and wow.
One of the stories that, I think this is one of the first ones that I read, and I know Barbara was one of the first people I remember contacting me about 105, and she was pretty excited about the idea of a creative nonfiction journal. And I remember her telling me, I have a couple of pieces that I want to submit. And she was going to have to go back through her archives and find them. So I'm very glad she did. This is one of our calf stories. And anybody who's spent any time on a farm with animals, has a story, I think, of an animal being brought in the winter. I know my mother talked about bringing baby pigs in the house in a suitcase in a snowstorm because my dad was gone, and I think she was pregnant, and she had to put them in through the bathroom window to get the baby pigs in the house. So I loved this story, and if you know Barbara, this is Barbara Waterman Peters. She's an artist in North Topeka, the Noto. She has a gallery up there in North Topeka, and she's an amazing artist, and her stories are lovely too, obviously. But that's what this story is about, bringing a calf in on a cold, cold night. And I picked out a piece here. My husband asked if we could keep it in the kitchen for the night, as it might be warmer there. Of course, I said it would be okay. I have a tendency to do that before I think opportunities concerning animals completely through. Again, though, that is another story. About this time, we hit upon the idea of calling the vet for advice. Fortunately, he was in, and in a rare frame of mind. Whiskey, he said, and mix it with warm milk. We looked at each other and at the phone as though we hadn't heard him correctly, but I found the wild turkey, nothing but the best for this calf, a pan and the milk. Now, just how strong you make a toddy for a calf that is only half an hour old isn't really mentioned among the various old wives' tales and folk remedies I've heard over the years, so it was a guess at best. To save my soul, I can't remember how toddy and calf came together. Was it a spoon, a soaked cloth, a meat baster, a funnel, a Tommy Tippy cup? Who knows, but we did manage to get some of it down into the poor shivering little thing. And it continued to shiver in our 40-degree kitchen, along with the rest of us. Something had to be done. Remember that one comfort zone I mentioned before? By now, 58 degrees was a tropical paradise. So we shifted the veterinary triage unit and its patient into my carpeted parlor. It was at this point that my nurturing instincts must have really kicked in, because I assumed all responsibility in the nursery. I began to rub the furry little body gently with a towel. I massaged its spindly legs and fuzzy tummy and silky back for 6 hours. In that time, I discovered things about nature I had not known before, such as the fact that calves that newborn calves do not have a smooth surface on the bottoms of their hooves, and that they have gray tongues and they smell very sweet. The long night dragged on interminably. Just before dawn, my husband had to leave for work at the Goodyear plant 40 miles south. While I fixed his breakfast and packed his lunch, having left the probably hungover baby in the living room, my husband suggested I call his mother, who lived 40 miles in the opposite direction, if I needed any help. Our daughter, of course, would soon be up to get ready to leave on the school bus. Before she left, I'm sure she offered her own 14-year-old wisdom, which would have been considerable, but then she too was gone. I was alone with a 6-year-old child and a 6-hour-old heifer calf, and we 3 females were all new to this particular kind of circumstance. Now as long as the heifer was lying on her blanket, all was well. She wasn't chilled anymore thanks to the first-class accommodations, so that was a relief. But the relief was short-lived. In fact, my very next emotion was panic. Not only was the creature alive, it was on the move. As soon as a calf is dry and warm, its first impulse is to stand up. This was my first inkling of perhaps having been too stingy with the wild turkey, because she was soon on her feet and frolicking around my furniture. I just have such a visual for this story. And maybe I shouldn't give the ending away. The last 3 paragraphs just had me laughing. And I love to visualize my dad reading this story. Because it's just perfect, this idea of this little baby calf in this beautiful parlor. Which I imagine Barbara's house was beautiful, immaculate. I don't know.
It was neat that people sent photographs too. I mean, when I contemplated a nonfiction journal, creative nonfiction, I hadn't thought about photographs, but people just said, "Hey, can we send photos?" And they did, and we printed them, and they look great, and it adds to the story with, so it's.
We even have a recipe in the book,
Yeah.
which is fun. That could even be a theme for a future issue. Food stories.
One story I'll read is, or part of a story, a couple pages maybe, is Tim Bascom's story. It's got a great title, and it's taken from his story. It's the Popular Mechanic's Guide to Things a Boy Can Do. And Tim is the director of the Kansas Book Festival. It's his first year there, and we're excited to go up to the festival this year. And hopefully it'll be in person. And so I'm just going to read a little, maybe a couple pages from his. So Tim Bascom's story is about going to the lake with his father, and he's telling the story as a 14-year-old. He went to the lake, or he's telling about 2 different times to Brown County Lake with his father. And one was when he was 7 with his brother and his dad, and then the second trip he's talking about was when he was a 14-year-old, and he's telling it as that 14-year-old. Late one afternoon in the summer before high school, I got coerced into a fishing outing with my father. I had planned to go to the town pool where I could goof around with a girl who seemed newly interesting, especially in a bikini. However, my older brother and mom were over in St. Joe, Missouri, shopping for dress pants, and Dad was unusually insistent, almost as if afraid to be home alone. It irritated my 14-year-old self to be dragged into this outing, since my father was not much on fishing. Typically, he would just unsnag lines or work hooks out of fish mouths. Often, he didn't even maintain a pole. Nevertheless, around 5:30, we bought burgers at the cafe on Main Street, then drove out of our town, Troy, Kansas, headed west down the winding blacktop of Highway 36. Neither of us had been back to Brown County Lake for years, and when my father turned off the highway between Highland and Hiawatha, rattling down a 1-mile gravel entrance and parking by the dam, I hardly recognized the place. I certainly didn't notice a rectangular tar paper box slumped under a bush, not until Dad called attention to it, asking, "Remember your boat?" I strolled over to the odd object which was half buried in the grass. It might as well have been the roof to a 2-person outhouse. It was a complete riddle until I saw a foot-sized hole in the tar paper. Then a row of memories clattered into each other like tumbling dominoes. I really botched that one, didn't I? Said Dad as I hoisted one corner of the wardrobe-like object, uncovering a crude plywood paddle. Some of your best work, I smirked, an engineering marvel. While I gazed at that tar paper artifact in the summer of 1975, I remembered how the whole concept had taken root 7 years earlier. One evening near the end of first grade, when I began flipping through an antique book my granddad had given me, The Popular Mechanic's Guide to Things a Boy Can Do. I had studied the line drawings closely, not able to read much yet. There were a bunch of great rustic pictures. One depicted a boy in poofy knickers and a button jacket bulleting down a hill on a kind of snow ski tricycle. Another showed a boy in a wedged cap throwing a giant balsa glider off a cliff. Did you and your dad make stuff like this? I asked my father, who was laid out on our brown plaid sofa, resting after checking on patients at the hospital. Not really. All I remember was a chicken shed. Hey, check this out, said my brother Jonathan, 3 years older than me, who had been reading over my shoulder. He pointed to a drawing of a boy fishing from a boxy, homemade boat. Then he grabbed the book and took it to our dad. What do you think? Can we make it? Give it back, I yelped. My father barely glanced at the illustration, smiling as if the idea of a homemade boat, though amusing, would remain an idea. Come on, Dad, said Jonathan. We could do it. I know we could. Those things are never as easy as the instructions, he replied. However, he took the book and pulled his glasses out of his shirt pocket. If anybody's going to make a boat, I am, I insisted. It's my book. Well, it's my idea, said Jonathan, speaking with confidence that comes from being a big brother. And the two of you need to cooperate, our father warned. If we work on anything, it'll be shared.
That was a lovely story.
It was.
I was so thrilled that Tim submitted. And he writes a lot of creative nonfiction.
Yeah,
that's his
next book, Climbing Lessons, about more boy dad stories. So
yeah.
It's great. And like I said before, each time I read it, these stories just dig into my soul deeper. There's just something about them that just, so I'm lucky that we're doing this, that I get to read them more than once and, dozens of times with proofreading, but, I just haven't gotten tired of any of them. There's something rich about these pieces.
In the publishing I've done, that's something I've learned, like when each read like brings you deeper into it and you love it even more. I definitely feel like we're on the right track here.
Yeah.
Because the whole collection does that for me. And like I said, as I slow down, as I've stopped thinking in terms of editing them and laying them out and getting all the pieces right, it's so easy to just fall into these stories. We have one by Ruth Moss, and this is a fun story because it's just the kind of adventure I think I would love to go on. Maybe they'll do this again one day. I'll have to watch for the next anniversary. But she writes about, was it 1993? The 150th anniversary of the Oregon Trail. And I remember when this was happening because Rand's uncle went on this event, went on this drive. And I remember him telling stories about it. It was so fun to listen to his stories. So when Ruth shared her story about going on this ride, she walked part of it. I mean, a lot of people walked it, rode horses. And Ruth she's an amazing poet, and she's really an amazing writer. It was fun to get this story from her voice.
She has a great sense of humor that comes through in this piece.
Definitely, yeah. So this one was called Echo of Times Past, and it's by Ruth Moss. And this is a little ways into it. The day was clear and bright, promising to favor us with plenty of sun and a moderate breeze. As the wagon train set out, first over a gravel road, then soon over the original dirt trail, it became clear that the day would be very hot, typical for August in Kansas. Gina and I each carried a canteen, wore large cowboy hats to shade our heads, and had slathered ourselves with sunscreen. We had tried to dress comfortably in our t-shirts, jeans, and modern hiking boots. Some of the participants were a great deal more authentic, sporting real buckskins and other period costumes. The women's long skirts looked cumbersome and hot to me, though I admired the spirit it took to wear them. After the first mile, a beautiful covered wagon pulled by a pair of matched Belgian draft horses pulled alongside us. The driver, Rob Phillips of Lawrence, Kansas, and his sister Frances Hayes of Osawatomie, generously offered to transport our heavy backpacks in their wagon. They didn't have to ask twice. The fact that we had a long walk ahead of us became painfully clear soon after that when my modern hiking boots began rubbing blisters. I had worn the boots many times before without a problem, but never while trying to keep up the brisk pace set by horses. Suddenly, somebody behind me screamed, "Run away!" As I turned around, a team of blonde mules hurled past us on the shoulder, dragging a wagon with 2 terrified passengers. Their wildness spooked the other horses and mules up and down the line. Riders and drivers struggled to keep their own animals from bolting. About 50 feet in front of us, the trail narrowed sharply to a bridge covering a small creek. Another wagon at the mouth of the bridge pulled up hard to allow the runaways access, avoiding a collision and a dangerous spill over the embankment. The runaways finally came to a stop against another wagon on the far side of the bridge, but the incident had scared us. We took a few minutes' break while others calmed the skittish runaways, still trembling and wild-eyed with fear. All of this occurred less than 2 hours after we started. That would be, I think, a fun trip to do. We'll have to do it together, Cheryl.
Yes.
When they do it again. Let's see. If you want to read one more,
Yeah, I'll read a short section from a piece by Janet Sunderland. And she lives in the Kansas City area, and her story is set in Marshall County, I believe. And her stories, she describes herself as a nomad, and then she traveled around and lived different places, and then she came back to Kansas, and then she was surprised that her mother came for a visit and stayed, and then her son also moved from Hawaii to Kansas to hang out with them, so. But it's a story of just a family of connection, of continuity, of life, and it's just her life intertwined with her mother. It's just beautiful. It's called Balanced in Waiting, and Janet Sunderland is the author. And she has a memoir coming out soon called From Ocean to Desert by Shanty Arts Publishing. So we'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
But here's a clip from her piece. That evening on the long drive back to Kansas City, Mother sat quietly staring out the side window. Finally, I heard her sigh as she turned to face me. It's time for me to move into the Good Sam, she said. And just that quickly, a 2-week visit turned into forever. Once Mom entered the nursing home and I started driving the highway, Kansas became a vision, an idea, a drama of sky and land. I watched the fall harvest. I watched winter creep into ditches, and I watched the light and shadows deepen. Seasons change almost in secret, as if only in the silence of not looking can something so tremulous come into being. A few farmhouses nestled solitary among the clumps of trees, as if the builders were uneasy about their place in the sweep of land and looking for a safer parameter at night from the repetition of field, pond, lane, pasture, alfalfa, milo, pond, wheat, and sky, forever the sky. From the cache of family stories, I remember the one of Grandpa Albert's father, the man who originally came to Kansas in the 1860s with his bride from the old country, and how he'd ride a pack mule to St. Joseph for salt and sugar, the only things they couldn't produce on the farm, and turn around to walk back with a loaded mule. Another story Grandpa Albert told was about the time when his father was away and the Jesse James gang came through and spent the night. All they wanted was a meal and a place to sleep, and left coins on the table before they rode away. I think the toughest part about Mom entering the nursing home is my own entrance into the memory of death. I mean, maybe there's a residual memory, a cellular memory, sort of like the reptilian brain, but older, that remembers the time of nothing, a one-cell time of existence before the moment of contact. Two universes collide, one egg, one sperm, a blinding flash, an electrical charge riveting two cells into the inexorable process of becoming. Do we remember the time of nothing, of being a universe, alone, contained, before the mighty crash of joining made us feel? My mother isn't afraid of dying. Am I? I didn't think so before this. Before beginning my travels on Highway 36, I was confident my return to Kansas would begin something new. What I didn't know was that my beginning would include an ending. What I didn't know was how much my mother's face reflects my own mortality. Such a deep and meaningful piece she wrote.
Yeah, that's it.
So the theme for this issue was beginnings, our beginnings, everybody else's beginnings. The next issue, we are doing Kansas road trips. That's going to be a fun collection to read. I can't wait to get those stories. And we thought ahead, and we're going with bicycles for our third issue.
Third issue will be bicycle stories.
Surely everybody has a I fell off my bicycle story. So let's see, for people who want to write stories about Kansas road trips, they'll need to start thinking about those, because we will take those starting May 1st. May 1st already? Wow.
Yep.
May 1st to June 30th.
May and June.
We'll be accepting submissions for Kansas road stories, so that's coming up.
We've got our dates in the back, so you can be constantly reminded.
I want to read a section from a piece by Roger Heineken. And Roger is in our group, our Emporia Writers group, and we're pleased to be able to have one of his stories in here. And Roger came to Emporia State University, I think it was in 1969, to go to college, and he's been here ever since. We kept him, yay. But Roger wrote about, he mentions in his opening Prairie Earth, the deep map of Chase County that William Least Heat Moon wrote in 1991, and Roger decided to do a story about Emporia too, the 12-block area that was the initial plat of Emporia. And so he decided to explore that 12-block area, and that's what he wrote about. Roger loves history. So here's a section of his story that's called Found Along the Way. Beginning on January 1st and concluding on Kansas Day 2011, I explored Old Emporia in 12 sessions, walking approximately 34 miles. I snapped many good images of architecture, plaques, and the curious. Because Kansas Day on January 29th is the anniversary of W.A. White's death in 1944, I organized my trek to finish at the William Allen White family home, which is now Red Rocks State Historic Site. I have lived in Emporia since 1969. My trek took me onto streets I had never traveled in 50-plus years. I discovered that my slow crisscross navigation through the town gave me a new appreciation for many of our architectural landmarks. Walking against traffic on a one-way street gave a fresh new perspective. I was able to read the plaques along the way. Most people never take the time to read. I realized how many wonderful buildings from the 1920s are still part of the architectural fabric. I passed near the site of the former MKT Railroad Depot, which is now a soybean elevator. In 1898, this was where Buffalo Bill's Wild West and Congress of Rough Riders of the World show performed. Emporia's population then was 7,500. Excuse me. According to the Emporia Gazette account, the Wild West show drew a crowd of 15,000 for the matinee and another 10,000 for the evening performance. January was a great time to appreciate the magnificent scaffold of mature trees that dot the old part of town. I tried to imagine the same trees before the Dutch elm disease decimated our old American elms arching over every street. So that's just a section of Roger's piece, and he describes everything in that of interest in that 12-block area, and included pictures and photographs of scenes around town, so that was fascinating.
I learned so much from Roger, and every community has to have a Roger. We need to just find those people and make sure they're contributing stories to our...
Let's see, his nickname, Mr. Emporia, is online journals now.
I know.
Why
Online is, I don't know, so easy. I don't like to read on the computer, maybe because I'm on the computer all day long, and I want a book that I can stick in my bag and I can hold, and, well, I guess, like I'm playing with pages all the time. I love the feel, the smell. And I didn't want it to be about, oh, this is cheaper and this is easier to produce, and I wanted it to be substantial and something you could hold and appreciate. And oh my goodness, this is just beautiful. You can't do this cover on an ebook,
It makes it so much easier to do readings, if you, for these authors to say, oh, I've been published in a journal, and have the journal, and then to go to, their readings or their open mics and say, I'm going to read from my story so,
Oh, and just think if you're a reader and you could collect signatures of all the authors, and there's room, they could actually, you could have your book full of signatures by the authors. How fun would that be?
I think.
And for that reason too, it was important to me that it's our writers are getting paid to be in here. I know it's not a lot, but I expect that to grow, because I feel like it's important that we treat our artists with respect, and we value what they're giving us here, which is wonderful stories. It shouldn't be just oh, look how nice, here's your gift getting published in my book. I want them to actually get something for their work, because I think art is important, and our stories are art. Our stories are
connections.
Connections.
Humanity. Their stories are life.